Panel. Okay, so we're about to resume. Okay, yeah, so this is going to be our afternoon panel. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bevil Wooding, and I will be your moderator for this afternoon session. And we're going to look at a very interesting topic this afternoon. We're going to look at exchange points, internet exchange points, but we're not just going to be doing the standard, what is an exchange point and why does it matter and why do you need to have one? Because we already have many across the Caribbean. The real question before us now is, now that we have them, what do we do to actually make them work for us the way that has been promised? And so this afternoon, we'll be looking at some of the issues that surround internet exchange points in the Caribbean. We have examples from Belize, which recently launched its exchange point. We have a statement to read from the Trinidad and Tobago Internet Exchange Point, that's TTIX. And I believe we also have some insight to get from the Barbados Exchange Point, BARIX, B-A-R-I-X, that also launched earlier this year. So a number of these exchange points are new, and we want to be able to hear from them as to what the experience has been and what the plans are for growing them moving forward. But first, I'd like to walk us through a very brief contextual presentation that sets the Caribbean Internet exchange point movement into context. And let me just get that set up for you. All right. So as you heard this morning in the opening remarks, the CTU, the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, has spent the past few years supporting, promoting, increasing sensitivity across the region as to the role of internet exchange points. And they've been doing that in collaboration with Packet Clearinghouse, the organization that I represent here today. And we have been largely successful in establishing exchange points in the Caribbean. But as we have said, and you've heard for those of you in Belize and those of you around the region who are listening into this session, as we've been saying from day one, internet exchange points are simply a foundation stone to the internet economy. So quick recap, what's an IXP? This is your country without an IXP. These are customers on a network. This is your internet service provider. These are customers on a competing network. And with any point on the internet, remember the internet is a set of interconnected networks. The connection point for the exchange, for the ISPs and for the networks on the internet is always via somebody's exchange point. The only question is it a close exchange point or a faraway exchange point? For most of the Caribbean before 2008, 2009, the scenario would have been in the domestic or national space, customers on network A trying to talk to customers on network B, whether they were across the road or in another city or town or village, would have to have their internet traffic go outside of the country only to be brought back in. With the internet exchange point, simply put, instead of having this faraway exchange point, the internet exchange point, the point at which networks switch to exchange traffic, is brought closer to home. And what that results in essentially is a faster, cheaper, and more efficient way to move bits between networks. And that really is at the core, what internet exchange points are designed to achieve. One of the things that was said often in the early stages of the CTU's work in sensitizing governments, in mobilizing the internet service providers, at the time they were saying, the Caribbean is special. These markets are too small. Our customers only want to see content that lives outside of the region. And of course, hosting is also very expensive. So we really shouldn't have to bother with internet exchange points. The problem with that argument is, as the internet economy develops in any country, as you start to put reliance on government services, as businesses start to put their products and services online, any cut in your international transit suddenly results in your local connectivity going offline for no good reason. Yesterday we heard as well that the very real dangers from a security standpoint of passing data onto external networks for no good reason. And of course, if you follow the money, there are also economic implications for paying for your traffic to go out via expensive international transit routes, only to bring them back in and paying again for them to come back into the country, only to get a customer that is already inside of it. And we've used many examples to describe this. One of the common ones is, think about trying to get from Belize City to Dangriga and having to fly through Miami just to do that. And yes, you'd laugh, and it would be expensive, and it would be time wasting, and it would be costly, and it would be foolish. But that's how internet traffic had gone in the Caribbean for a long while before the emergence of internet exchange points. Long, expensive, inefficient routes to move traffic out of the country and out of the region, only to bring it back in. So what we found over the last few years of establishing the exchange points is that even though the markets are small, even though the numbers that you would find for internet traffic exchange in the Caribbean wouldn't match, for example, a London or New York or an Amsterdam, the impact that it makes on the local industry, on the local economy, the benefit to consumers is significant. And on top of that, the opportunities that it creates for new services and new content applications to be brought into the local market are simply not possible without a local exchange. So it starts a new conversation. So here's the Caribbean IX momentum, just to give you a sense of where things are. These are the 12. So this morning you heard more than 10. These are the 12 active exchange points in the Caribbean right now: BVI, Curacao, Dominica, and most recently, this year, Belize, Barbados, St. Vincent, and Jamaica also established and activated their exchange points. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, these are nascent, small exchange points, but they're also significant steps forward for these countries. And here's a promise, and this is what we want to discuss in today's panel. The promise is more local bandwidth, right? If you think about this equation here, if this traffic is passed from this network to this network via a process that is described as, and you'll hear this term often, via peering, where this network A, agrees that because it wants to get access to customers B's, it wants to get access to customers on ISP B's network, that it will exchange traffic via this facility on a cost-neutral basis, and vice versa. So with peering, the ISPs say, basically, if we have a local IX, we're not going to charge each other for moving bits and bytes between our networks. What that means is essentially whatever is the size of the switch, the actual technical equipment at the exchange point, whatever is the size and capacity of that switch, is the amount of free bandwidth that is available in the local marketplace. And you'll understand when I say free, what I mean is you don't have to consider international transit rates and all of the things that go with it, like throttling, like content or data packet inspection to make sure that people aren't doing bad things to congest your network. This traffic all of a sudden is offloaded from the international transit and just runs on the local network. And we'll talk about what that means in terms of opportunities. The second benefit that we have immediately seen as we proliferated exchange points in the Caribbean is more local traffic routing options. Remember what I said earlier. Wherever you are on the internet, traffic has to pass through some exchange point to get from one network to another. With the proliferation of exchange points in the Caribbean, it means that if traffic had to get from, let's say, Barbados to Antigua and Barbuda, now it has the option of considering passing through an exchange point in St. Lucia or Trinidad and Tobago or Miami, depending on the routes and the efficiency at the time. Those options simply were not available before. Those options create opportunities at each of those local touchdown points, just like it does for NAP of the Americas in Miami, where most of our traffic used to go to. But you'll notice I have two X's here, and this is what we want to look at in this session. The two X's are the promise of more local innovation. Because we have cheaper, more affordable bandwidth, and because we have more local traffic routing options, we ought to have the opportunity to build out the Caribbean internet. This nirvana where the applications that meet our needs and solve our problems, that allows us to find our best beaches, our best vendors, and our taxi service, and our security services, running on our networks, transacted in our markets, in our banks, this local innovation still hasn't really come forward. And for a number of reasons that I'm sure the presenters will get into. And the innovation ought to lead as well to more local content. And I want to make some quick points about that. The domestic internet economy, when we talk about accelerating Caribbean internet development, for the domestic internet economy to develop, users have to shift from being merely consumers of somebody else's content hosted in somebody else's market to producers of local content, facilitating local transactions running on local networks. And that's a very important consideration for us to get inside of this. If we really want to accelerate Caribbean internet development, then it means that more actors than simply the internet service providers have to be brought to the table. For the service providers, remember, as soon as they participate in an exchange point, they immediately receive the benefit of shorter, cheaper pathways to move their traffic. But who thinks about local innovation and local content? The ISPs? Is that their job? And that's the big question mark over all of the Caribbean IXPs at this point. These local networks that we are talking about with this local content and these local applications then allow us as a region to connect to the global internet. Just like how you would think about accessing Facebook content or YouTube videos, you're on somebody else's network consuming their internationally available content. Think about Belize Channel 5 or the Caribbean News Network putting their content on a local network, serving local customers, but also making it available to a global audience. That's how the domestic internet economy develops. And the truth is, the countries that benefit the most from the internet and its promise are the ones that make the greatest investment in infrastructure and business facilitation services around that infrastructure. So for us, if we think about it, and I'll stop here, building the Caribbean internet economy, we have to look at these four areas. Local content. Where's the e-services, or where are the e-services coming from? Who's building our web and mobile applications? Where are the streaming services going to be anchored in our region, in our markets, to allow for local content to really come alive? And don't think of local content only in terms of websites. Local content means government services. Local content means security services. Local content are those wonderful videos you see on YouTube with Caribbean dialects and animation and so on that live on YouTube but satisfy an inherent Caribbean appetite to see more of us online. That's local content. Support activities, the legislation, the investment. Remember yesterday we spoke about I think we called it the enabling environment, right? So the support activities that allow for this to take place. Investment, education, policy, legislation, media attention. If all of our digital heroes are found on glossy foreign magazines and in glossy foreign references, then would the young entrepreneurs think about establishing their businesses here at home? Or would they think that to make it, they have to go outside? And a lot of that has to do not just with whether or not we have investment, but what are we projecting before them that says to them, hey, you can actually do your dream or realize your dream right here at home. So support activities is another critical component. Local infrastructure, which the technical community has been working apace to get established. So you have Albert Daniels of ICANN here. He can tell you about DNSSEC and DNS. We have the Caribnog community, which has met several times in Belize, that is looking at network protection, cybersecurity. And all of these services are best located at the central hub that the IX provides. And then finally, I put it this way, human resource development. This is not about networks. This is about people making decisions to build things that make a meaningful difference and meaningful contribution to development in the Caribbean. So I want to leave this map with us as we get ready for today's presentation. I hope this has been a useful context setting. We're talking about accelerating Caribbean internet development, building on the IXP promise. And we have Etienne Sharp of Belize. He has been instrumental in the establishment of the Belize Internet Exchange Point. We have the chairman of the Belize Internet Exchange Point here in the audience. We have representatives from Cable and Wireless. You have to have your wearing here, right? Or should I say the company formerly known as Cable and Wireless and soon to be renamed. And then we have, I think, a statement to be read from our friends at the Trinidad and Tobago Internet Exchange Point. So that's what we're looking at. I want to hand over to my good friend and colleague Etienne, and he will take us through PICs. Yes, welcome.
Thank you very much, Bevil. So quickly, I'm going to start off with a quick history of how the BIXP came about. Belize Internet Exchange Point was the brainchild around the table, Carbnog, over 4 years ago. Specifically instrumental in that conversation, I remember there was Mr. Barrow from the PUC, my good learned friend next to me, and a couple others. Like, sure. Oh yeah, yeah. So sorry, yeah. Sure. Yeah. All right. Sure. And as you can tell, 4 years is a long time to actually make an IXP come about. But just to give an idea where we came from, Packet Clearinghouse and the PUC have been very instrumental. Without them, it would not have happened. To give you an idea, bringing everybody together just for a meeting in the beginning was very difficult. We actually had to create a memorandum of understanding that originally, I believe, was worked on just to get people to agree to a non-binding document that you would agree to, because players are very much competitive and didn't want to play in certain markets, and certain people wanted to play and certain people didn't. And I mean, the government as well was very much behind it and very instrumental in helping things move. So to get an idea of the stakeholders that we have signatories and started with was the PUC, Packet Clearinghouse, BTL, SMART, University of Belize, Alternative Networks, Alliance IP, Broadband, NetKing, Internetworks, Centaur, and there are other signatories to the agreement as well. UB saw the value straight away, and they committed to actually giving us a neutral location to actually house the IXP, because that was one of the first fights. And from there, it was pretty much easy to agree to memorandum of understanding, agree on articles, technical meetings to see how we connected, technical support from PCH to bring the IXP online quickly. We continued to work as members. We continue to work as members to exchange traffic. And we're looking forward to engaging Akamai, Facebook, Netflix, and encouraging the building of local entities to connect and create local content and platforms. Just to come back to a bit of the history. So 4 years down the road, we have an IX up. And amazingly, since we got it up, we've got more than one person already knocking on the door again. We have the four people knocking on the door going, we want to join, we want to connect. We have pretty much all the major players and all the major last mile providers. I like one of the presentations yesterday concentrated very much on the importance of the last or the first mile in terms of their importance. And thankfully, I can see we've got every single one of those providers on board the IX. Bringing the future of the internet to Belize, one of the things that I grasped from day one about the IX was not only the value of reducing costs, because that was basically the buy-in for most of the providers, which was to reduce the cost of international bandwidth, but I immediately saw the idea that, I can't remember if it was Bevil or Bill Woodcock came up first, which is you create bandwidth. And it took me a couple of seconds to actually grasp, but you actually do it. You actually create bandwidth. It's bandwidth for free, and it's bandwidth you create here in Belize. It's not international bandwidth you pay for. Yes, there's a cost involved for every provider to reach the IX and for us all to maintain the IX, but the actual value in terms of actually having free bandwidth that is only a cap in terms of the size of the switch we have in the IX. So we have an IX now. What do we do with it? For me, the IX, the University of Belize primarily saw the value and will capitalize. They have yet to capitalize, but they will capitalize on this as a way to remotely deliver education. I think throughout the last couple of days, it's come up again and again and again about digital literacy, and that comes down to everything. From your kids learning how to use the internet and what is YouTube, what is Minecraft, whatever they're playing at. The IXP also empowers other educational institutions. We have several of the private institutions. Hopefully, the public institutions will do it soon, using full e-boards. All their books are all PDFs. And they're fully engaged the idea of immersing people, because the only way we're going to take advantage of the BIXP is to immerse people in technology and then basically push people. So the BIXP also empowers the media for education to help ICT move to younger and younger practitioners. My children are fully immersed in it. In fact, I know when the internet is down at home because the kids come tell me the internet is down. And I would love to see the day when they're using servers that are housed here in Belize, and that's one of my biggest points I want to move on to. Yes, all the providers will benefit by bringing services that are foreign closer. Google, Akamai, Facebook, Netflix come to mind, because that obviously helps them save money. What I would like to see is for those savings to be translated into allowing faster, more capacity to local servers. If they can work out that local servers get priority over foreign servers, even better, but that the access to local service is reduced, and that to encourage people to actually bring services back into Belize. We've got two of the platforms I've seen used recently with kids coming back to education is Alice, and another one that has really caught a lot of traction is by MIT, called Scratch. And obviously coming from MIT, it'll always have some traction, but I've seen my kids, my older kid use this myself, and I was amazed at how quickly he learned, how quickly he grasped the concepts, and basically taught me a thing or two. So I think the BIXP is only one cog in the piece, and we'll get on the cogs later, but it is a major cog in terms of points that my learned friend already made. But it should encourage, enable, and empower our local and regional economy. Again, about the digital literacy, lower the cost of all content created and hosted. That's the important part, hosted in Belize. Right now, almost all our television stations and radio stations have some sort of content hosted, whether it be last night's news or some archives, but very little or none are actually hosted here in Belize because of the cost. Again, I would like to see, and I believe it's one of the ways, it's one of the most important way we can incentivize people to bring back content to Belize, to be hosted by servers here in Belize that will allow people to regain confidence in the fact that we can do it better here than they do it out there. And that is always a cost-driven thing. The speed of connectivity between the users. You know, if you have a locally hosted gaming is something that hates any kind of latency. Gaming, and that's another huge one. To have servers here that our kids play on, develop, whether it's a Minecraft server. I use Minecraft as an example because my kids have one, and I'm ashamed to say it's not hosted here right now, but I'd love to see it hosted here. But they set it up themselves. I just did the basic setup. They go on, they build, they invite their friends, send their friends a link, they go onto it, and they play together. Data centers. We don't have data centers in Belize. We have silos where people host their own information, whether it be some form of government or Social Security or BTL, one of the providers, but we don't have any data centers in Belize. And somebody else brought up a point about building ecosystems around business. to build systems around business, ecosystem around business, we need data centers in Belize. We have data processing people that run BPOs in Belize, and not one of them hosts anything here. In fact, a lot of them, it's basically a big VPN that goes out to the States and everything is done there, or to some other location, everything is done there. And that needs to change. And something Bevil said earlier, and a few other people said too, was developing local human capacity. That's the only way I can put it. And I can give a personal example of working on a project where I was the only Belizean. I had some guys out of Lithuania and some guys out of India, and we all worked together at stupid hours of the morning to get a project done. And I would like to see more and more of having a human capacity in Belize to be able to use more and more Belizeans on projects like that. Like I said before, I personally believe that IXPs are only one cog. You have many different facets that have been covered by different people. The ones that come to mind at present right now is regulatory. And my friends will tell you, I've been no big friend of regulation, but we do need regulation in terms of, because in the past, regulators and regulation has always been seen as a big stick. And it's a mindset that needs to change, where regulation is seen as empowering and enabling and developing a level playing field, rather than something that is a big stick to come around and hit you across the head. When it comes to government, taxation of equipment, taxation of goods and services that we offer, and that are that we need to, resources you need to buy in. You got a whole data center to build in Belize, bring it in fully tax-free, because you're building something for the country. Is that sort of thing that I think government can particularly do, leading the way, giving more e-government, taking part in creating a business park that, even if you have to bring people in from outside to start with, but slowly but surely our people will be developed. And then the big one that always comes up time and time again is education. And I mean education from primary school all the way down into infant 1 and infant 2, and I'm not sure what it's called around the rest of, but to bring it down to that level to be able to move forward. So for Belize, I think, and I remember quoting this to one of the reporters here in Belize at the time, and I said, this is the biggest change to development of the internet in Belize since the internet came in 1997 or something like that. But and again, to coin a good phrase that my good friend Bevil Wooding used at the opening, was, this is just a sugar. This is just a sugar that we need to use to bake some wonderful cakes. And the people who need to bake those cakes is us. So we need initiative from basically all stakeholders, because when I put up stakeholders there, those are just immediate stakeholders in the IXP. But the real stakeholders in any development is pretty much everybody, and it's to push every cog to move forward. And again, I've tried to participate in every single one of these, and that is how we got to where the IXP today is. And I'm thankful for specific support from PCH, who was exceptional. A gentleman called Nishal, and I can't even pronounce his last name, but worked with us. He was in South Africa, and he worked with us at stupid o'clock his time. People in the PUC, Mr. Roosevelt Blades, I need to point out, was extremely instrumental in pulling heads together and quietly talking to people and putting the paperwork together and everything, and continues to work with us to push things forward. Mr. Errol Katus, who's our chairman, again, was one of the real fighters that said, listen, this has to be done. So again, we are at, I gave the analogy of we just went through a 4-year pregnancy, and we're just giving birth to the BIXP. So now we have to take care of the baby and nurture it and feed it and educate it and let it grow, you know. And I'll thank with everybody in the room who's helped to do that along the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Yachi. Testing. Yeah. Thank you very much. I'll use this one. The one of the things I hope we take away from this is what he has described is not simply, or not only the Belize experience. These are patterns, these are models that have been echoed around the region. And there's one thing that he did not share with you, and that is Belize was actually the first country in the Caribbean to have every single commercial internet service provider sign an agreement to be a part of the exchange point. And that has been unprecedented. I think something that is worthy of its own applause. So we're really looking forward to some excellent models and examples coming out of Belize. Next, I want to invite my new friend. Next, I want to invite our representative from one of the region's largest internet service providers, Ms. Juliet Best Braffett, to share with us the perspective from an ISP side. Cable and Wireless has participated in all of the English-speaking English-speaking Caribbean countries in the archipelago, and they've had an interesting vantage point and an interesting role. In some of the markets, they're really just one of two players, and now since their recent overtures to the former competition, we have a scenario where they're actually the only commercial internet service provider at the exchange, even though they're still wearing multiple legal hats. So wanted to get your views on internet exchange points in the Caribbean and what the experience has been like, but more so, what do you see going forward in this new liberated market?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I didn't have the opportunity to do a preparation of a presentation, but I'll do my best here. With respect to the experience of Cable and Wireless, what I can say from our experience in Barbados is that our experiences in the other areas of the region gave us quite a good platform to step off from in terms of setting up barracks, which is the exchange in Barbados. We were able to use the memoranda of understanding from some of the other regions. We had the experiences that they had gone through, and we were able to let's say, bypass a few of the stumbling blocks that they would have experienced. Nevertheless, our baby took perhaps as long as Belize's, and we have not yet, certainly we have not reached the stage that Belize has reached. And I would say mainly because in the situation of barracks, we didn't have quite the level of buy-in that Belize seems to have enjoyed. Particularly, we have a branch of the University of the West Indies in Barbados, Cave Hill campus, and we had no buy-in from them for the initial setting up of barracks. My understanding now is that they have displayed an interest in utilizing the internet exchange in terms of facilitating their online education and for storing materials and so on. But it would be good if they were an active player in the actual setup and management of barracks. What I can say though is that it would seem to me that the Eastern Caribbean, Barbados in particular, is suffering from what I would call our history, in that we are a history, but we are historically a consumer, and this new facility that we have that would enable us to be providers more or less, we have not yet totally taken that on board so that we do the necessary paradigm shift and move to being to producing our own materials, selling, offering, whatever, doing. We need the facilitation. We need the information. We need the guidance. We need something that Belize has had, the e-government. We need the leadership from the government, the interest. For example, currently in Barbados, we have a situation where there are some issues with our revenue authority. And in the integration of the revenue authority, they have been talking about facilitating e-payments and so on, you know, making it easier to, well, more or less sit in bed and pay your taxes. But what we have instead are a reduced number of outlets for payment and long lines at all the other places because the e-payment facility just does not work. And we have barracks. So I do not understand why it would be so difficult for the government to set up something like e-payments. But in the presence of a situation like that, what is the encouragement? What is the incentive for our people to have confidence in the market that we say that we have provided, to try to build the platforms? And in doing so, another challenge that my friend Etienne has mentioned is that everything that you try to do, whether or not it's a benefit to you personally or to the country as a whole, there is this whole taxation thing that makes the various bits cost 6 times as much as you would have to pay to the original provider. So these are areas that you have to more or less counteract before you can get the IXP really functioning. The other thing is basic information. I think in Barbados that our IXP, and I guess my friend Mr. Davinish will beat me for this, but it's still largely, even though the announcements have been made, it is still largely a secret to the man on the street. If you walk into Bridgetown and ask 10 out of 15 people about the IXP, they will look at you like you are speaking Greek. And I don't doubt that I can increase that to 12 or 13. So the people who are involved know about it, but the people that is targeted to benefit, they really don't know about it. So in not knowing about it, then they cannot change their thinking to take advantage of it. And I think that's something that we will need to do in order for it to really fulfill our expectations. The other thing is the supporting legislation, the things that are going to protect the users, the people who are going to build the programs, the facilities, and so on. The supporting legislation is just not there as yet. And that is something that we will need to put in place. It makes no sense to set up elaborate mechanisms and then there's nothing to support them. So these are all areas that we will need to look at. But I do think that the basic objectives of the IXP, especially for the providers, are being met in that, as you say, you've increased your local bandwidth, you've reduced your costs in terms of having transit routes going outside of the country. You have I made a little note here. You've saved some money. you have better quality in terms of reduced latency. And strange enough, even though there was some seesawing at the beginning, you fostered closer relations between the providers. I guess some of us will say too close, but these are all the basic objectives that we've met. And I think that having actually set up the internet exchange, we can now proceed to look at informing our beneficiaries and encouraging them to make more use, I should say, of the facility that it provides. I probably will come up with something else later. Thank you.
Sorry, while I was listening to my good friend next to me, I remembered a couple of things that I need to cover. One of the challenges we had at the beginning, and we're all like, "Hush, don't mention that, because nobody's want to give any." Was transit capacity. Now, what's transit capacity? Well, if you're going to entertain Akamai or Google or whatever, yes, the way it works is anybody who accesses the content after that, anybody else in Belize access it, it doesn't go all the way to Google. It just stays here in the Google cache server in Belize. Unfortunately, at the time, the only person with one of those is the incumbent. And obviously, they benefit from it. But we've been able to, again, cajole, pull ears and everything else. And our goal was 2 gigs. And I'm happy to say that all the major players that actually have international connections and some of the smaller players that are buying from them have all committed to there or thereabouts 2 gigs. I think we'll get there. I think we'll get 2 gigs that we need to actually fill those servers up, because that's some of the cost savings. That's the buy-in. Yeah, and for me, it's a double-edged sword. It's what you need to save money to then be able to offer that savings back to local content, to local content CDNs, to drive the economy to, again, instead of being the users, to being the producers of the internet economy here in Belize.
Yeah. Juliet made some important points. One of them is the whole issue that for the providers, the basic benefits have been met. And this discussion about what comes next really goes beyond the providers in terms of bringing those other stakeholders to the table to start taking advantage of what now exists. And the other point that I want us to take note of that she said is, by itself, an IX really is not an interesting or sexy or exciting thing at all. You don't want the man in the street talking about, we got a new shiny IX, just like you don't want them talking about the fact that the water authority just installed a new fancy pump or the electricity company got a fancy new generator. What people care about is the improvement, the tangible improvement in the quality of internet service. And for that to happen, other actors need to be activated. And that's where this whole awareness and sensitization comes in. Because there are government offices that want to put stuff online, but have no clue that getting it online properly depends on a local exchange point. There are businesses that want to get their businesses online that have no clue that getting that service online depends on more local bandwidth being available. And so the conversation has to shift from switching traffic at an exchange to creating content at an exchange. And that's not a conversation for ISPs, certainly not an exclusive conversation for ISPs. That's a conversation for content producers, wherever they may exist. We have a statement from, you're going to read it? A statement from the Trinidad and Tobago Internet Exchange point TTIX that we want to read into record. They also have had some experience. They also had, I think, something a little longer than 4 years getting the Trinidad and Tobago Exchange up and running. But they now have, like Barbados, like Belize, a baby to take care of. Nigel. So after this, we'll be opening up for questions and comments. I hope you have your questions lined up. We have a very interesting group here and in the audience as well to field questions around both the IXP process, but more importantly around what comes next and how do we get local content going.
Thank you, Bevil. And on that question saying, I did notice a question pop up on the chat from the Barbados remote hub. Okay, so this is the Trinidad and Tobago Internet Exchange group called TTIX, and they're happy to forward this statement on record, and I'll just try to communicate the essence of it for you. The first phase of the IXP in the Caribbean is well on its way, which is the physical presence of an IXP in the islands. The current traffic exchange is minimal. Generally, the connecting parties are the IXPs, and in many islands, that comes down to 2. In Trinidad, well, Trinidad and Tobago, we have 7 ISPs connected, and a further 2 have shown interest. There has been an increase in the number of root servers in the region as a direct result of the IXPs. This increases survivability in the event we lose off-island capacity. In the Caribbean, outside of the ISPs, there are minimal entities that have their own IP address space and ASN, that's the autonomous system number. And this is a prerequisite to peering at an exchange. In Trinidad, we've seen some benefits with caching servers from Google and Akamai being made available to the smaller ISPs as a direct result of the IXP. And we are looking at bringing other caching servers. We have a root server in Trinidad and are looking at another one. We're also working with TT Mag, that's the TT Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, to assist in getting the .tt TLD root server in Trinidad and Tobago. There's a potential for a whole ecosystem to develop around the IXPs, and this will take time. The drivers are not all in the domain of an IXP, but require many parties to be involved and build upon successes. There is an element of the network effect where the benefits of the IXP increase at an exponential rate, the more users, entities, services we get to integrate in with the IXPs. Hence, we continue to develop and expand. There's a lot more the IXPs can be used for. Some things can be accelerated by design through a coordinated effort, and for others, it is a matter of time. The more traffic we generate, the more interest we will have in the IXPs. Regards. That's it.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, TTIX. One point that you'll realize is recurring here is that the more, if we want to get more local interest in exchange points, we have to have more regional examples. A lot of the momentum actually came on as countries started the process of establishing exchange points. I know for Belize, even though the process started 4 years ago, looking into the Caribbean and seeing countries getting their exchange points up and running, seeing the wars between ISPs as they struggle to come to terms with this whole issue of cooperating for the greater good. Those precedents that took place in this region were some of the biggest incentives for getting the process going at a local level. And so here we are today now with 12 IXPs, ISPs, Internet Service Providers, realizing the immediate promise of shorter paths for local data, but the bigger promise of innovation and local content and new applications that meet local needs still remains an elusive goal to be realized. And that's why I want to open the floor now to the audience for your questions, comments. Remember, this is the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. And the reason we're here is not just to hear the experiences that have gone before, but to look into the future and see what will it take for us to truly accelerate internet development in the region. And so hearing the examples that you've heard from Barbados, from Belize, from Trinidad and Tobago, looking at this map, which attempts to identify some of the critical components of the Caribbean internet economy. What are your thoughts around what comes next and how do we really accelerate? What are your questions around what has taken place and what are some of the lessons learned? And what are some of your ideas that can actually feed into our policy document and feed into, in a tangible way, the movement forward? I open the floor. All right, so there's a question from Barbados, which we'll go with first. Since the establishment of barracks, what has been done by the parties to promote awareness and support local participation by non-ISP stakeholders? Over to you. Actually, we have some representatives from the IX here as well. Feel free to respond and tell us, even if nothing has happened so far, what plans you may have for what can go for, what can happen going forward. Winston, Ashel, Jason, somebody.
Okay.
Okay.
I can
just identify yourself and organization, please.
Winston Davenant from the Telecoms Unit. We are in the process of publicizing and getting all our ducks in a row before we make a final launch and completion of the IXP. At this point, I would like to thank Mr. Bevil Wooding for all the help he has given us. And by the next couple of weeks, we would have it completed, his work completed, and from there on, we would move forward with the IXP.
Thank you, Winston. Just to give further context to his remarks, a number of countries in the Caribbean right now are actually mapping out the next steps. Interestingly and unprecedentedly, the Caribbean region is the only region in the world where the regulators have played such a crucial role in the establishment of local internet exchange points to the extent that they have. In almost every market, save perhaps even in the Dutch markets, the regulators have been the preferred referee for the interactions between internet service providers. And what that now means as we get to this stage is that the community is looking to the regulators to again push the process forward. Now, in terms of the largest, most efficient exchange points in the region, they all have one thing in common. They have a dedicated internet peering coordinator, somebody who is actually full-time concerned about getting more traffic to the exchange point. But for most of the exchange points in the English-speaking Caribbean, there is no such role identified. It is a side function of the regulator. There is a rotating cycle of technical support coming from the ISPs. But in terms of a dedicated human being saying that this is my responsibility to get traffic for the exchange point, that actually is not the most common practice in the Caribbean. I think Belize is moving toward identifying a person who will be given this responsibility. And I would encourage any ISP listening here or here in the room to give serious consideration to this. The next steps involve stakeholder engagement. It involves explaining to various parts of the community what the IX is and how to take advantage of it. That's not a technical discussion. That's now policy linked to opportunity, linked to development, linked to marketing and awareness. And most of the ISPs simply don't have the time or the inclination to follow through on that aspect of the next step or the way forward. So it means that for a community like this, the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum, the framework that we come up with for helping Caribbean exchange points grow to their next logical stage of development becomes important for helping some of those smaller exchange points understand what has to happen and how it has to happen before they can grow. If any of you want to comment.
Okay, what I would say is that one of the things that is, I think, hampering the education process for the public is the fact that in Barbados, the IX is not yet completely a legal entity. Whilst the technical preparations are all complete, Etienne's nemesis regulation has stepped in the way of the barracks, so that the legal areas have not yet been completed. So it's kind of difficult to go out there selling barracks when essentially barracks does not really exist. I think what we need to do is to, with as little delay as possible, get that out of the way, and then we can go ahead and educate people as to the existence, the utility, whatever else of this entity, because then it would be truly an entity rather than just a facility, which is what it is right now. The other thing is that Bevil mentioned the fact that regulators within our region were the ones who essentially pushed the internet exchange. And I suspect that this ties back again to something that Etienne said, in that in most cases, the ISPs were people who had interest throughout the region, and most of them technically saw themselves as little their own IXPs, in that most of them would have had relationships with Google, with most of the various large providers, and they themselves would have been doing the caching internally that you would do via the internet exchange. So they were not as, I wouldn't want to say interested, but invested in building the IXP relationship as the government would have wanted them to be. And I think that's also one of the reasons why we're having the difficulty with completing the formal setup. But I think with the interest of the university now coming on stream, that they will have their own, to use the word interest again, their own interest to look out for. And because of that, they will probably do their own campaign to make sure that people are aware of what they will be offering, what's available. And that would help with the whole process of educating in more ways, literally and figuratively, the public as to what's available on the exchange.
There's one little piece of advice I could give, and certainly our chairman was very much that advocate, was don't wait for everything to be right, because it'll never be right. Just put up the thing, don't worry about we'll finish the signing next time when I come, and we'll do this, but don't wait for this before see everything can happen at the same time, and make the process of people joining it very, very simple. Someone want to join, no problem. Don't make it incumbent. Don't make the costs ridiculous. It's supposed to be basically revenue neutral. Any money that comes in is invested back into a new point or whatever. But I think that is where we had a bit of a success. We had a few like-minded people. I can say for myself, Mr. Roves Blades has left the room, but he was certainly one of them, chairman, and a few others that sort of buck people heads together and say, listen, let's get it done. And then from there, work out the details afterwards. And that is certainly what was the final push or the tipping point for us to say, let us run with it. And now to continue people, because different people are at different stages of development, whether it be internally with their people or whatever. And that's where I really have to take my hat off to PCH, because they have given us absolute support. They've committed to some training for us. So as LACNIC, I believe, has committed to some training for us. One of the things I failed to mention that really needs a mention is PCH. They dedicated a router to us. It's their router, but that router is one of these lovely Cisco routers that comes with a server embedded in it, and that server offers the services of which one is at present we don't have our own root server yet, but that does a shadow server for us as well. So PCH has been very instrumental. Technically, we've got absolutely no problem. I can pick up the chat, the phone, whatever, and say, hey, what's up with this? And within minutes, I'll have an answer. So I would say if anybody has any problems when it comes to that, or advocating, like if you need somebody lobbied in government or whatever, this good man next to me is extremely good at that, grabbing up to the Prime Minister's ear and bending it and say, we need to get this done. So use the people in the room, use the people who are excellent at that, who have the credibility to say, this is what we've done here, this is what we've done there, this is how it can work for Belize, or this is how it can work for your island or your country. And then empower the people like us to run with it. I mean, certainly I can say between Bevil and Bill Woodcock, they told us, listen, we'll give you all the support you want, but you need to push. And we did. They did their part. We did our part. The regulator was very good. In this case, the regulator was extremely supportive and was one of the driving factors with actually getting it done. So they've, to the opposite of being a hindrance, they've been one of the advocates saying, everybody needs to do this. Everybody needs to be a part of it. You need to allow everybody in to push it that way.
We have a question from online or comment. Is it a question? Go ahead.
Okay, just to be devil's advocate, just trying to get an idea of in terms of the initial setup, the actual funding of the IXP, who actually funds it, and what is the plans in terms of sustainability? How is it going to be sustained? And secondly, in terms of, is there benefit in terms of the regional IXPs then connecting to each other? And if, where is that, or what time frame you see that happening, if it's going to happen at all, that kind of thing?
I'll take the first half, and then my learned friend is very good at the second half. So in terms of our experience with funding it, again, we got donations from PCH in terms of the switch. We turned to some local businesses that would definitely benefit from it, and they donated like a rack, UPS here. The PUC was extremely generous, getting their checkbook out, helping us with UPS, air conditioning, stuff like that. UB committed to the University of Belize, who is one of the core partners, gave us the location for us to be able to actually house it. We got support from, again, the regulator to make sure that the electricity company that owns the poles will be able to route all our fiber there. And in terms of initial costs, we have everybody, once everything was set up with bank accounts and stuff, because it is a legal entity. All the stakeholders, it's not a lot of money, but we all put money in the kitty for recurring and for new equipment you need to buy. But again, we've had tremendous support from PCH. PCH have already said you need a gigabit, you need to go 10 gig switch from a gigabit switch, no problem, we'll help you. So again, pull whatever ears you can and beg and beg and beg and make it happen. No. Don't wait around again for people to be coming out, handing out money to you saying, oh, you need money for your IX, even though we don't know what it is. Sure. Yeah. It's to actively go out there and don't be ashamed to go beg and say, believe me, it'll be worth it, but just give us some money, please.
So on the second part of the question, I think has to do with this notion of a regional exchange point. Did I get it correct? All right. Is there benefit in connecting them? The truth is they're already connected by virtue of the fact that ISPs on one exchange are also peering at another exchange. And that, when I said earlier that we have, as a result of the establishment of the exchange points in the Caribbean, we have new Caribbean routing options available. Think of it in this terms: if somebody if a customer of a network in Barbados wants to get email or chat over to a customer on a network in Antigua, traditionally that traffic would have gone out to Miami to come back to Antigua, to go back to Miami to get back to its origin point in Barbados. But with each of the exchange points that has been added in the region, they now become legitimate options for that traffic to be routed to. So the region is now connected in a way that it has not been before. And if you consider the fact that for all of our major internet service providers in the region have peering arrangements in North America and even further afield, it means that that traffic that would have gone between one country and a metropole country can now actually hop between islands, between countries like Belize, before it gets to where it has to go to. That was not possible before. So in effect, we have more routing options. As it relates to a notion that has been floated several times, the creation of a regional exchange point, and does the region really need all of these little exchange points? The short answer is yes, we absolutely do, for all of the national purposes that we have described over the last 2 days. The issue, though, is in establishing the exchange points, we also have to be very diligent about participating as far as possible in other exchanges in the Caribbean. So that means an ISP in Belize can actually say, I'm going to put equipment out at the exchange point in Jamaica, or I'm going to put equipment out at the exchange point in Trinidad to get closer to my customers because I notice a fair amount of my traffic is actually coming from Trinidad and Tobago. Those become options that are available, and that's how the ISPs grow, but it's also how you get the emergence of a preferred IXP somewhere in the region. Curacao has been very good at that. They have been they have been actively courting peers to the Curacao exchange. St. Martin equally they have been bold from the start in naming their exchange point the Caribbean Open Internet Exchange Point. because the ambition always was to attract as many peers into St. Martin as possible. And for a number of the Caribbean exchanges that's still worrying about, should I make my exchange point open? Should I allow foreign content providers or internet service providers to come here? The answer is absolutely yes. That's how the internet grows. And in growing, that's how we get more options for moving more traffic around our region. Hope that answers the question. Any other comments? I see Carlton looking like he wants to make a strong point in the back there. Yeah. All right, so he's agreeing totally. These connections are absolutely crucial to growth of the internet. We have a comment from Claire. I'm assuming this is Claire, correct? All right, from A. Claire. She says, the CTU and PCH have played a significant role in the implementation of the 12 IXPs in the Caribbean and need to be commended for their effort and success. Nigel says, you're welcome. It seems that it may be time for the momentum to shift somewhat for IXP deployment to building the Caribbean internet economy. These organizations, CTU and PCH, now taking on the responsibility for the type of stakeholder involvement necessary to move successfully to this next phase? Or how do you see that happening? Because somebody has to drive it. And for this important question, we turn to Mr. Nigel Casimir.
Well, to answer it, I don't know if to say that we take on the responsibility. We stepping forward to assist, certainly, right? So we've started things going along a particular road, and we realize that, as Bevil has on the slide up here, there are several areas that we need to address. We've been addressing the local infrastructure and enhancing the local infrastructure in terms of broadband, IXPs, and these sorts of things. And we're starting to get some successes coming forward. We've been working in the local content area, the HR development area, because you can see some of the products there, like Carib NOG, CARPIFs, Carib CLD, Carib TLD, and so on. And a lot of those things got going after initiatives by CTU and PCH, you know, to basically get them off the ground. They're running now to the extent that, well, CTU doesn't have to be involved. So we will continue to fulfill that role of like a catalyst, but we have to remember that CTU is not an operational entity. We are a policy development type thing, capacity building. That's our mandate. And once we see a need, we will seek to serve that need like within our mandate. So we will get things off the ground, but it is really to get the actual operational players to take up the mantle eventually. So we are going to continue to be involved. Our session this particular session is talking about accelerating internet development and building the digital economy through this particular initiative of building up the IXPs, the value of IXPs in the region. So we are still in it, right? And it's really a question of getting more people on board such that things all work together for the overall benefit of the region. I don't know if PCH has any.
Well, this will be Bevil Wooding and all of the hats, because the question is an interesting one, and one that we should all consider. If you look at the organizations and the HR development, as Nigel said, they all spun out of fora like these. And CTU has been instrumental in supporting the development of these initiatives. Carib NOG is a volunteer-based group that is looking specifically at development of the technical community. CARPIF, the Caribbean Peering and Interconnection Forum, is looking specifically at the issue of ensuring that as many new content providers understand and participate in the emerging exchange points across the Caribbean. This is a forum set up specifically for internet exchange point implementation and growth. And it has come out as a result of fora like these. And Carib TLD was also initiated inside of a CIGF meeting. And the intention there is to make sure that while we're dealing with the infrastructure and while we're dealing with the content peering, that we're also looking at promoting and strengthening our country code domain, top-level domain name operators, the people who run .bb and .lc and .tt and .bz, making sure that they understand what best practices and so on. But you'll realize with all of these initiatives, it's a combination of local push and participation and regional facilitation. Because ultimately, and I think Etienne made this point earlier, ultimately the responsibility for growing your IX falls on you. PCH is a facilitator, CTU is a facilitator, Caribnal, CARPIF, these are all fora intended to bring people together and expose them, train them, build them, support them in the work. But the work is a collective responsibility within country to ensure that all of the things are in place, as Winston said, to ensure that everything is lined up in the way that it has to be lined up, based on local understanding, based on local priorities, based on local goals and objectives. So Claire, the short answer is things are moving forward. We are supporting, but the longer answer is that we all need to support for it to actually work going forward in a sustainable way. Let's take one more question and then we'll bring the session to a close. Jason. Oh, I thought he was agreeing with strength and power.
Hi, Jason Hines from Barbados Remote Hub. I was agreeing, but I also wanted to make a comment. So I definitely think that the local people have to take on much more of a bigger effort. And I think that the great outreach awareness and capacity building activities have to bring in the technical community in the Caribbean and in the individual nations a lot more. And they have to take a bigger role in furthering the development. So the national ICT industry associations and ISOC chapters and individuals who make a career within this field have to do more. And we need to find ways to break through some of this, the shackles of our traditional thinking and action or inertia of culture and more formal structures, and try to do things that keep growing our industry and improve the stability, reliability, security, and performance of our infrastructure that we depend on for our careers. So my call is to the national associations in ICT and the ICT individuals to do a lot more. And I think a lot of the conversation I'm hearing somewhere in the side, I'm making the inferring that they're looking to you as PCH or CTU to do more, when I think really it should be moving stronger nationally. And I commend Belize on what they seem to be doing in collaborating, and good work. I hope it continues and more people take examples from that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. In terms of the ICT association that is literally being born as we speak in Belize, something we're looking at for quite some time. And the other bigger wings, I think, is people like the Ministry of Education, who can certainly use it to empower people. The government of Belize, for e-government, there is a plan. Not sure what it is, but there is a plan. And I totally agree with using the resources around your PCH, CTU, whoever, ICANN, LACNIC, pull their resources wherever you can. But at the end of the day, to grow the IX, that is the way we need to be looking, no? And regionally, we look at regionally, there's no reason why IXs we can't come up with an idea for the same way how we have ISPs in one country, we have IXPs connect to all each other, but with that we need bigger players, that every single IX is connected to every single other IX. And I mean, obviously capacity depending on how much traffic is going from one to the other, but I would love to see that as a region, that we keep that we grow as a region. And Belize is one of these very unique points where we connect, and we connect in more than one ways to the Caribbean, more so than Central America. but we're in a very, very unique point where we can also connect into Central America. When we initially looked at the nearest one for us to connect is actually Honduras, which is a decent sized one. When we looked at it, so yes, and the reason why I bring it up is because it's only by thinking big that we'll continue growing. If we stop thinking big, we're just going to be stunted and stay right where we are.
Very good. Very excellent way to conclude this this panel. Thank you very much to our panelists and to you, the audience, for the questions. At this stage, I would like to hand back over to our session chair. Me? Thank you very much, Bevil. That was an excellent panel. Okay. Very, very, very important discussion. And I'm sure you realize here in Belize, a lot of interesting things are happening in an environment that you wouldn't ordinarily look for interesting things and innovations to happen. But what I find useful about it is that the constraints here are the constraints that we face in other parts of the region. And what they're doing to overcome those constraints are precisely the kinds of exportable patterns that we can be using in other parts of the Caribbean. So it's very good that we have this opportunity to share the ideas, to share the experiences, and to share the challenges in a way that carries us forward as a region. I think at this stage, we're about to take a break. How long would it be? 15 minutes? 10? We're starting back at 3:15, so enjoy your coffee break, and thank you very much.